Hi, my name is Ayaka. I am a consultant with LSAT Unplugged. I've been with LSAT Unplugged for about a year, a little bit over a year. And I started where you guys are. So I started as a LSAT studying person. And then, I love essay writing. I love writing in general. And so I started leading these admissions classes. And over the course of the last 9 months, I've interviewed a bunch of admissions officers here with the LSAT Unplugged. And I have gained a plethora of information about the admissions process, so much more than what I knew even a year ago. So I'm here to share that information with you guys. And so if you have any questions about the admissions process, or if you're like, hey, this is a point of concern in my application, feel free to share that concern. We are all here to help each other and to lift each other up. So there's no dumb questions out there. Feel free to share that concern or question, and let's, answer that together. So today, like I said, we are going over finishing touches for your essay. And really, this is kind of one of those things where it's like, when do I know when I'm done with my essay? And it's one of those where you may have 10 drafts, some people may have 20 drafts. And you're like, every time I look at my essay, I feel good about it, but I'm not sure if I'm done. And as people, I think we really want that stamp of you are done. And it just, most times you don't get that. So I'm here to kind of tell you what to look for, and, say, okay, I'm done fiddling with it. Let's send it in. So really what we're talking about here, and I've presented this before, but we're really in that stage 4, stage 5 of essay writing, where it's like, okay, we are going line by line, let's look at word choice, grammar. Does the sentence flow into the next sentence? Does the paragraphs make sense where they're being cut? Do we need to add a word? Do we need to do a grammar scrub? Do we want to include conjunctions? All of that. And we're doing this deep scrub. The students I work with, this usually for a 2-page essay is about a 4-hour endeavor of, okay, let's look at each sentence, read it from the beginning, and then, say, hey, what do we think about this word choice? What do we think about this sentence structure? Do we want to switch something out? Is this the right sentence to have here? And then also reading it top to bottom after that edit and saying, do we feel like we've taken away too much of your personality? Do we feel like this sounds like you? And kind of doing that work. And then a little bit of that zoom out of okay, does it actually fit into your application? And hopefully that's not the only time you're doing that zoom out, but it's one of those things that you really want to be cognizant of in every part of your application and essay writing, so that you're not losing sight of why that piece of writing is there for you in your application. So kind of red flags. I understand the want and the need to be done with your essay. More than anyone, I'm like, yes, I know people just want to be done. They want to write it and they want to move on. However, if you are asking consistently with your editing circle that we talked about last week, if you're consistently asking hey, am I done? Do you think I'm done with my essay? I think the majority of the times that answer is no. And you wanting to be done is pushing that question more than you feeling that you're done with your essay. So I understand that emotion, but it is kind of a red flag if you're doing that. And I get that all the time from students that I work with, who say hey, you read my draft, do you think I'm done? And I'm like, if you're asking me that question, I don't think so. Are you dreading another round of editing? Editing is hard. It's hard work. You have to criticize your own writing. You have to, be very, very critical about word choice, and it takes a lot of time. So totally understand you dreading it. Not showing your essay to someone for fear of getting feedback. Sometimes people will say like, oh, I don't want to show it to you again because then you're going to give me feedback and then I have to change my essay. And it's like, well, there's a reason why we give feedback. And then are you cutting it close and you just need to get it in, right? You're like, hey, I have my essay is due tomorrow and I need to get this in. And more times than not, I'm working with students where they're like, hey, my essay, I need to turn in my essay next week. And we're like, well, welcome to the last sprint. So those are kind of the red flags of, something that may be outside of yourself being satisfied with the essay that you've written, that may be motivating you to say, hey, I just need to be done. I understand emotional burden of like, you just need to get it done. But I think it is worth your time and your energy to take the time to do that last scrub and last deep polish on your essay. How to know when you're done. The feedback from your editing circle, if it's consistent and consistently good, I think, and consistently, this can be a little bit of a misnomer, but I know a couple weeks ago we talked about how finding the right person to edit your essay or look at your essay and give you feedback is important. You don't want someone who on your first or second draft you show them and they're like, yeah, I think it's good. That's not really great feedback. But after you've gone on a journey with your editing circle or your person that you're getting edits from, and they're like, I think this is a great draft, and that is consistent across multiple people, I think you're close to that finish line. If you yourself feel really good about what you've written, you're like, hey, I think what I need to say is all in these 2 pages and I feel good to go. Yeah, maybe, I think that's a sign that you're pretty much done. And then lastly, this is something that we get to after that deep polish that I talked about. The edits you're making are minor edits. So like, are you just changing a word or saying like, hey, this sentence sounds really awkward, so I just may need to like rotate where it is in the paragraph and stuff like that. And you're kind of playing around with these very minor details of your essay. I think you're close. And sometimes you just need someone else to be like, hey, I think you're done. So those are the ways that you kind of know you're nearing the end of your essay journey. In the middle, you're making big structure edits and you're like, hey, I need to replace this story with that story and blah, blah. And once you're done making those edits and you're very confident in your story, it really should be these minor edits in the last, couple drafts that you're working on. Like I said before, these finishing touches should be really, word choice, sentence structure, tone that you're working on. How does it come off? And in that stage of essay writing, you really should be asking pointed questions to your editing circle. If, asking like, hey, I'm concerned about this topic or this sentence here. Does it sound right to you? Does it feel right? Is it a floating sentence? Does it stylistically match everything else? I'm a perfectionist, so I get really deep into it. And sometimes when I'm working on, these finishing touches with students, we're saying the paragraph out loud over and over again and saying, okay, does it sound right? If we change this word, okay, let's say it out loud again. If we change this around, does it sound right if we add a comma here? So it's stuff like that you should be working on in the final touches. There should not be big content changes. So really, this was a quick spiel. I hope that made sense. do we have any questions out there?
I guess I have questions unless you're gonna move on to something else.
Nope, this is it. So go ahead and ask questions.
Okay, so I just signed up for the program, so I'm a little unfamiliar with like the
Well,
entire. Yeah, thanks. So I've had like three people look at my essay, and I felt like it's not polished yet, and I feel like I do need somebody to like really critique me. So I guess I don't really know where to start with the program, so I hopped on today because I saw there was a class. Um, I guess as far as like how do I get my essay edited? Like, do we meet? Like, I guess I just don't understand the process.
so I don't do like private one-on-one private readings here. It will be, to the class. So if you want your essay read here in class and do a coaching session, we can absolutely do that. We do. I am planning to do one, not next week, but the week after. So if you send your essay and hopefully we can get to it, and we'll do like a live, let's read it, give some feedback. Hopefully people in the class will have some feedback. And that's one way you can get feedback on your essay. I do want to acknowledge that, people are trying to get their applications in December, or early next year. So hopefully we'll have a couple more classes like that, so we can kind of keep your essay moving forward, and you don't feel like you have to wait 4 months to get feedback for your essay. Clint knows this, but last week we had a little bit of time, so we had a session where we kind of just shared maybe a paragraph or two from each other's essays and gave feedback. And I do encourage other people in the class to give feedback as well. And so I think we can do that today. We have a little bit of time, so we can do that as well. Let me ask Taylor, what sort of, I assume you've written a couple drafts of your essay already and you've given it to other people and you've gotten feedback. Is that the stage that you're in?
Oh, no. Yeah, so I did a proof statement and then a diversity statement as well. Okay. So I had a previous tutor kind of overlook it, and he kind of just gave me general edits, as far as like grammatical and stuff like that. But as far as like I wanted more direction as far as my content, right? Like, am I wrapping all this up? Is this making sense? Does the story go with why I want to go to law school? But I had positive feedback from 3 different people. I just I definitely don't think it's ready to submit. So
okay, yeah, I do encourage you. I believe we have from a couple classes ago, we've done this whole writing series together, and there's a couple sessions that I've done like a spiel about how to start and how to think about the personal statement, and how to think about the topic and all of that. So I do encourage you to go and check it out and see if it resonates with you, and see if your essay aligns to what I'm saying. It's really how I view personal statements, and it generally works for most people. So and if it doesn't, please come back and say, hey, like that didn't help me in moving my essay forward, and hopefully we can figure out a way to help you move your drafts forward. So if you would like, we can share essays here, or whatever draft you have here. Clint, do you have a draft you wanted to share today as well?
I just worked from the last time. I guess this was last week, right? Yeah. So last time we spoke, I know you asked me to work on the inner monologue, and so I worked on that, and then I worked on the next paragraph, and then I just wanted to discuss. I'm not applying till I'm going to try to do the fall of 2022 semester, so I'll be applying, I guess, in the spring, so relatively soon. But I just wanted to ask, after this next paragraph, the way you kind of recommended and the way I'm going to write it, if it sounds good, and then I would probably finish up that next, body paragraph and conclusion this weekend. Yeah. So I'm fine with editing again or sharing again.
Okay, so Taylor, let's start with you. If you're comfortable sharing,
Sure.
um, and we'll do probably a couple paragraphs, not the whole essay. And I talk a lot, so there's a lot.
So generally, how does it work? Do you want me to send like a link in the chat or
Jeff, can you give co-hosting to Taylor so she can share, please?
share my screen?
Or I can, maybe I can. No, I can't. And then we can share essays and then we'll give feedback. And in terms of you feeling like you're not ready to turn that in, is it that you have questions about what should be in a personal statement, or do you feel like you just want more critical feedback, or what do you?
Yeah, I think I just want it more polished. I feel like I have a good story. And I do feel like it kind of shows like the type of like obstacle I overcame and like how, yeah, I think it's a good storyline, but yeah, I just think as far as like, sometimes I don't know if my structure, like maybe if I'm bouncing back and forth a little too much, in my like thoughts instead of like having it all just flow. I don't really know because I haven't really gotten feedback like that, you know. So I don't really know what to expect. I haven't had in depth, I think, like this before. So
Um, actually, okay. Jeff might have gotten. I hope he hasn't gotten disconnected. But Taylor, if you can share a link with me, I can pull it up and then share it with everyone. If that's okay.
wait, how do I do that? Is it like through Google Drive or something?
Have a Google document of your.
I feel like I should know how to do this, but let me see if I can figure it out.
And Taylor, are you applying this cycle?
I plan to apply for fall 22.
Perfect.
Let's see. I can.
Thank you, Jeff. So it looks like you're co-host now, Taylor. So
Okay, there you
go. Have your up, and then thank you, Jeff. And share your screen.
Right. Can you see everything?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's your personal.
Yeah.
So I'll do like I'll read through the first 3 paragraphs maybe. So
Sure.
Okay. And if you can, whenever I get to the bottom, if you can scroll a little bit, that would be great. So, okay. And I'll read it out loud. So at the age of 13, I was diagnosed with a severe heart condition that required immediate heart surgery, or the consequences would result in my death. I remember watching my heart rate drastically rise and fall electrocardiogram as the cardiologist's face turned as white as a sheet of paper. I knew the news would be calamitous. Coming to grips with information like that was devastating, and I started to fear the unknown. Heart surgery was scheduled for the near future, yet I had to return to my discombobulated teenage life of school. I was soon deemed as a sick girl in middle school. My classmates looked at me as if I was some strange science experiment, and teachers treated me like I was a failure in their classroom. I lost connection with my identity and how people perceived me. My image was no longer who I was as an individual, but how my medical issues defined me. I was surrounded by doctors and nurses, gowned up and wheeled away to surgery as I took one last look at my family with uncertainty in my abnormal heart. After a long 4 hours, my heart surgery was successful. I now had the privilege to embrace life with open arms. It was the moment in time where I faced death knocking at my door, which drastically changed my outlook on life. Let's go one more paragraph down. Over the years, I changed the narrative of my life, which propelled me into opportunities to use my voice and face new challenges. My experience has taught me adversity is not just limited exclusively to heart failure, but rather to many underrepresented individuals in our criminal justice system. When I was in my undergraduate, I embraced the opportunity to intern at the public defender's office. My job duties consisted of conducting interviews with defendants and giving them the chance to tell their side of the story. At 24 years old, I sat face to face with criminals that did horrific acts for countless different reasons. Some I will never understand. But what I did understand is that they were human. And at some point, they lost their identity too. I naturally found my voice as an advocate during my internship. I passionately addressed the lack of diversity in the legal profession, the racial disparities that plague our justice system, and reflected on the manifestation of inequality in my home community. Okay, great. So scroll back up. So thank you for sharing. Let me say, wow. That must have been really tough on you and your family. So thank you for sharing and putting it in an essay, because I think it's really, personal growth is there clearly. I see what you're saying and what you're asking in terms of feedback for your essay. Question for you is the heart condition and heart surgery part. It's pretty well laid out as to like your inner monologue, which is great, and like what your thought process was and your experience through that. I'm wondering, do you do the same thing for your internship? Like, do you talk about it in detail? Because I kind of, in that last paragraph that we read, and yes, Clint, I agree, very inspirational. In the last paragraph we read, you kind of said, oh, I do this job, and then kind of skipped forward to, you saw kind of the disparities that you saw in terms of underrepresentation and all of that. So, you spend a lot of time describing your experience with your heart condition, which is good in terms of you saying like, this is the personal growth that I had and the personal journey that I had, and just kind of saying, the internship that you had is also really important, and it's a life experience that I'm sure has opened you up to taking on a legal career. So I just wonder, is there enough weight given to that piece of writing as much as you've condition part of your essay?
Yeah, and I definitely don't think so. I think like I need to tie it more in with the internship, I guess, or I don't know if it's because I'm talking about two different topics. I guess what I thought is like, how do I compare like myself and like feeling loss of identity and such into the justice system? How does this even make sense? Why is my heart condition even relevant to law school? So I guess that's why I was like trying to tie it in with an internship of like loss of identity, not knowing who you are, kind of like, like criminals get, they have these, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but we put these labels on them, right? So it's like I somehow experience that too, just on a smaller scale. So I don't know.
And
it made sense.
And I do like that comparison that you make of like, hey, like you were labeled the sick girl, right? And then that comparison of like, it's not your only feature, yet that was what was the label. And you seen the same thing in your internship of like, these people are labeled as criminals, and they get stripped of everything else in their life because they are labeled as criminals. So that's your point of action, and saying like, hey, this is where it has turned me to a legal career. And I think that's enough to say like, that's your why law school, right? Like you identify with that and you want to do something about it. So I think that's fine. However, I think we spend a little bit too much time, and I hate saying this all the time, but it's an important story to tell. Like, it's such a strong story, and I'm sure you've cut a lot out of this, your heart condition story, but I think we need to shorten it a little bit more, so we give a little bit more space to talk about your internship.
Yeah, I agree. Because when you read it out loud and we talked about like being wheeled away, I was like, okay, this is still going on. Like talking about my heart, kind of a little too much. But I was trying to kind of like tie it in. Like, obviously, I overcame the surgery. It was successful. And here I am now, right? So yeah, trying to cut that up a little bit.
Right. And I think a lot of parts here, like, you bring a lot of emotional pieces here. But I think even in that third paragraph, if you're like, hey, after my successful surgery, and that's enough for us to know that you've gone through surgery and it was successful, right? So
Okay.
there's ways to kind of shorten that story. And it's unfortunate that we have to shorten it. But they're, asking for a 2 to 2.5 page essay, which is not a lot. So, you want to figure out ways where you're not compromising the content, but you can shorten what you're saying. We believe you as readers, like, and as admissions officers, they will believe you if you tell a real story. So, that's kind of the thing where it's like, what do they want to know? It's like, actually, they just want to know who you are. So tell them the story, but embellishing and kind of going too deep into like what other people's experiences were of it isn't the way to go. So I know you have like the nurses and your parents there and your family there. That's all important, but I would narrow the scope to yourself and say, this was how I felt and the label that I was given, and it wasn't great. And
Okay.
I with these people that I work with now because I've been in a similar situation of being labeled.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I mean, I think you're going in the right direction here. So, and are you over 2 pages? Or are you right at 2 pages?
Um, I'm right at a little under 2 pages.
Okay. I would really bulk up that internship piece if you can. I think you're talking a little bit in general terms here a little bit. So I would actually take that to a more specific story. Not necessarily like a specific person that you've worked with or anything like that, but to kind of say like, tell us exactly what you do, I think is a little bit more helpful here in understanding why you're identifying with the people that you're working with. Like, I understand like a label piece, but also you're kind of skirting a lot of the I don't want to say your day to day, because we don't really want you to go talk about like, I make coffee for people and then I read the briefs and blah blah blah. Like, that's not what we're looking for. It's more like, what are you drawn to in the day in what you're doing, and then the hooks of the legal profession, right? There's different things that hook people in. For example, my journey to the legal profession is a little bit different than everyone else's, and it's like I started off in like risk management, and I'm the most risk averse person, so I'm like catastrophizer. But that's kind of where the legal profession hooked me in, is like that aspect of like looking at a situation and saying, and looking at it in a compliance sort of way. That's a little bit different than I'm sure what hooked you into your legal profession. So kind of, I'm trying to figure out what is hooking you in. And because your explanation of like, there's underrepresented individuals in our criminal justice system, like that's very general. And I'm like, why are you pulled there? Why is it that you are identifying that as your kind of North Star of like, hey, this is why I'm going into the legal profession?
Okay.
Okay.
Sense? Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Any questions you have here?
I guess just one more. So I know you talked about kind of going into more of like letting the reader know what I'm doing, right? So like I know like there's the sentence there, like my job duties consist of conducting interviews with defendants. So I personally would go into, and I don't know if maybe I should be more descriptive, like I would go into the actual like interview rooms with them, and we would sit like face to face, and that's where I kind of like was like, okay, like what happened, and I would sit down and jot down their side of the story, supposedly. So I don't know if I should go into that. I mean, I do remember there was a certain defendant I talked to, and from the story he told me for why he did what he did, it was really like, oh my gosh, like I would do that too, right? If I was in that position. So I don't know if that like somehow tying that into that. I don't know. If that
Yeah,
makes
I think, hold on, give me 1 second. I'm like, I'm getting a text.
no problem.
I think that would be a great, and I'm trying to think of a way to introduce it without being like, here's a brand new story that I'm telling.
Right.
Narrative. I think you can bring elements of that in and say like, frame it in a way where after my job duties consisted of conducting interviews with defendants, and kind of say, you know, what they tell me makes them human, and their circumstances, to understand their circumstances gives so much more context to the crime that happened.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and kind of walk us through that discovery of, you know, because I mean, even now, and even hearing that, I'm like, but a criminal is a criminal. But then if you understand their story better, it kind of puts into perspective all the things that went wrong and all the things that went right, and then, you know, how that person ended up in that situation. So to have that understanding is a show of empathy, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of people talk about in personal statements, and it's also a part of being a lawyer. So I think that's a good thing to talk about and say, hey, you know, this shows a lot of empathy. You might not need to say that explicitly, but kind of say like, look at this episode, like I have empathy for these people.
Right.
I
Okay. That sounds good.
think that would be great.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So if we're good to move on, unless you have any follow-up questions here,
No, it's good.
Clint, why don't you share your screen?
Okay.
And we looked through the first couple paragraphs of yours, right? Already.
Yeah, so I haven't even, I'm gonna go on to kind of that third, that I guess second to third section. I just wanted to find, well, not perfect, but kind of work on the inner monologue that you discussed after that section, and then kind of gateway that to the, I guess, talk, or just ask you a question about how to lead it to that, like why law school, or, you know, what I found that led me to law school. So I just wanted to ask that after this, just to confirm that I'm on the right track, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, and let me ask, how did you feel kind of going through that inner monologue and kind of the inner thoughts that you had going through the experience we talked about last week?
Pretty good. I didn't want to get too like in depth where it's sways away from the overall story, but I felt like I included kind of the inner monologue that I went through that led me to kind of, you know, the whole question is why law school? Everyone asks why law school, or just why any kind of field. And the main one I found was, you know, your parents did that, so you were motivated by that. At least the people that I've known have kind of been that answer, really. So kind of connecting when someone asks me what I would want to do, the inner monologue I guess, the inner thoughts that I had
Mhm.
when answering that question. So that's what I kind of threw in there, not threw in there, but I thought I placed it relatively well, and then just lead into the next paragraph, I guess.
Yeah, so I think it is right after the question mark with Italian American crime family, right? And then that's where it starts.
Correct. Yeah, that's where I worked. I left the note there from last time, and that's where I worked on it.
Sure. Okay. So like while the idealistic American parent came home after 5, how can you explain that your father might not be coming back? Are you to answer truthfully, hoping the reaction of your peers is not of judgment, but of understanding? Answers and questions swirl in my head as I grasp for a sense of escape. The question always loomed. What will my future hold? Are you to follow the footsteps of what your father walked into? The stories you hear aren't of the usual family conversation, rather vile topics of your father and grandfather going to the same social club as John Gotti, or hearing about a man who is an expert at getting rid of a body. While the movies glamorize this lifestyle, it all comes crashing down, and families are left trying to piece together an impossible life puzzle. And so, with someone of my background, why do I want to attend law school? The answer is becoming a lawyer was the faintest of ideas. I did not come from a family of law, nor did envision becoming a lawyer from a young age. In fact, it was a criminal justice field that I was motivated to join at first. Contrary to belief, seeing the FBI agents from a young age made me believe that I could make a difference through becoming a police officer. That rationale was a cause and correlation. Arresting criminals would thus be helping the families that are often the unseen victims. With my plan in motion, I set my sights on gaining the experience needed, and I found the school that would guide me, Northeastern University. And do you have anything else written?
No, that's where I was. That's where I had kind of the where I had a question of the next.
Okay.
Yeah, no, not yet. I do plan to by. I'm not sure when. I wanted to make sure I submitted it in enough time to, when we do that live read.
Yeah.
But I did plan by this weekend to kind of finalize it. It has now. Can I do a single space, or it has to be double space? That was another question.
Those directions are in CAS, and I've seen margin spaces be specified. I've seen spacing be specified, font size specified by school and differently by school. So I would each one.
Okay, I'll reach out to the school like you recommended just to confirm, because nothing was listed on the website. But just to make sure that my essay doesn't get thrown out, I will make sure.
Yeah, and it's usually listed in the CAT, like your application in LSAC. So I would take a look at that as well if you haven't opened it up already. And at the schools that you're applying to, that has a lot of information as well. So but in general, I think it's double space and 1-inch margins, but that could slightly change depending on school. I like your inner monologue. And I know we're not in like editing yet. You're still kind of writing out your draft of your essay. So I really appreciate kind of the emotional part of it that's coming out, and kind of giving us clues into what your thought process is. I do encourage you to start thinking of the questioning statements as more regular statements, and seeing if you can flip the narrative a little bit. Because I understand the setup of your essay is like, hey, like you grew up and you're kind of questioning these things, and you're saying like, these aren't right. Like, oh, this doesn't seem right. And as a young mind, you're kind of questioning. I am stylistically kind of not for questions in essays, because they leave room for like other thoughts in terms of the reader. So I think right now this is fine as a placeholder of where we are. I think, in that second, third draft and iteration of what we're writing here, you may want to think about kind of turning those questions into statements. However, I do love what you've added in this whole like a young mind kind of looking at the world and saying like these don't sound right, and kind of that mindset and inner monologue that's happening here. So I do love the vulnerability of all of this.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll try to. I see what you're. Yeah. No, I understand. I can see with the questions how. I know. I think you know what I mean by it. I see how someone can read the question of, are you to follow the footsteps of what your father walked into, as to possibly them thinking that I would ever consider that. So I could see where those questions can cause further questions in someone's mind.
For
So
sure.
I will try to change that into a statement.
Yeah.
Do you recommend how to do that with that one? Like, are you to follow the footsteps? Can you leave that as a period instead of a question mark there?
Well, I think the way to do it is, what are you trying to get across with the question? And for example, with the whole, are you to follow your footsteps of your father, of what your father walked into? I think the essence of that question is, do you want your life to look like what your father's life looked like? Right. So the answer to that question is like, I didn't want to follow in my father's footsteps, or I questioned whether to follow in my father's footsteps, right? Like that is the statement that's behind that question. And it's easy to pose a question because it allows you space to be like, hey, like you might not know exactly what I'm saying, but I think to state it in a statement, to say, I saw this in my childhood, I didn't want to follow that, or it gave me great pause to follow in my father's footsteps. And that is a more concrete answer than the question that you're posing.
I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, no, thank you. That actually really helps. I will definitely.
Yeah. So
change
kind of
that.
going through all your questions and kind of saying, okay, what am I actually trying to say? And then take what you're actually trying to say and put that in your essay is probably the best way to go about it.
Okay. Yeah. So an answer to the question itself, like a statement of the question itself.
Yeah. Because you're looking for a certain type of answer by posing that question, right? Like if you ask me, like without the context of your family, right? And if somebody said like, hey, are you going to follow in the follow your father's footsteps? I'm like, yeah, my dad's a doctor, he's a surgeon, like he would love it if I followed in his footsteps. But you don't want to grant that space. You actually want to make sure that your thought is in there. So that's why I'm saying, like, you answer the question how you would answer that question and put that in the statement.
Perfect. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think I can easily switch that around. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that helped a lot.
And Clint, I have a question for you. I know you ended that second paragraph with putting Northeastern University in your essay. Are you tailoring this essay just for Northeastern University?
Oh no, I graduate. That's what I wanted to ask. I graduated from Northeastern. So I was just going to say, kind of tailored to, once I got to Northeastern, that's where I really saw, just from, the internships with various federal law enforcement agencies,
Mm-hmm.
and then city law enforcement agencies, kind of the, it's a quick turnaround. It's, defendant in, defendant out. Nothing really changes. The ADAs or whatever can get promoted. They go up per, conviction, everything like that. But
Mm-hmm.
the families are kind of like the unseen victims. And, even being on the prosecutional side doesn't pertain, doesn't help, so to speak, the families kind of in need. It's just a very, turn system. There's so many people coming in and out. So I was just going to tailor to, once I got to Northeastern, and from those early experiences, I kind of was seeing what I truly wanted to do, and what I thought I could do. And then, I would connect probably my current job into that. And then that would lead me to, what I would bring to the legal/law field or law school.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 things. I think that can get really long, which is not a bad thing at this point in your essay, right? Like, write as much as you need to, and write everything you want to write without censoring yourself. And then, we can always cut out. So that, I think that's fine to kind of explore writing about your experience and kind of go through the steps that made you realize that being in law enforcement in the way that you thought you would be is not the way that you want to go, and kind of go through that journey. I'm sure it's going to get way long. So, there's going to be pieces that you have to cut. I do encourage you to stay away from this turning into like a list of jobs that you've had and like what you learned from each job. Just because, number one, it gets
Got it. Okay.
and number two, that's really not the purpose of the personal statement. You have your resume that you can, kind of list out the jobs and what you did out on your resume. So you don't need to do that here. I think it would be great if you focus narratively on maybe a pivotal moment in the internship or in the job that you've had. I don't necessarily think you need to write out your university.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah, that's a question I had. I didn't want to confuse anybody or think that they thought I was
Right. Yeah, I was like,
applying to Northeastern.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going. I was like, are you applying to Northeastern? So if you, I think you can cut that out and say, in your during your undergraduate years, you had internships where you, I don't know, worked with an ADA or whatever, and whatever experience you had there, and kind of focus on that. And I know I'm sure there's more than one pivotal moment where you're like, actually, this is like, being a lawyer is the way to go. But if we can center it around an experience there, I think that would be better suited for the type of essay that you're writing, especially because we know that we need to get to a point where you're saying, the jobs in law enforcement wasn't helping the victims, and how it feels to be not necessarily the victim, but those affected by law enforcement and the criminal justice system. And so we need to get there, and that's a long explanation. So yeah, we just need to focus it around a narrative where we're going to understand a lot of the nuances that you're talking about.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to, yeah, that really helps a lot. That I just wanted to confirm all that. I wasn't, I knew in 2 pages I can't, talk about, go into detail or further detail without going, way over. So I think I'll try to word it where there's kind of one pivotal moment, and then, base it upon that, why I lost school. And okay, perfect. Thank you.
And this goes for you, Taylor, as well. Like, it's better to have more and then kind of chop it up and kind of say, okay, we need to cut this, we need to cut that, rather than, there's people who write a page and they're like, I have nothing more to write. And I'm like, give me more. And it's really hard to pull out more. So I encourage y'all and everyone watching this later on YouTube or listening to this on podcast to kind of write more than you think you need. I say this all the time. My first draft of an essay was 6 pages long. So, it's okay to go really, really big. Usually you find other topics in your essay that you're like, okay, we can't talk about that, or we just need to cut it out, or we can use it in other optional essays. So really think about it. And write as much as you need to in that first couple drafts. Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sticking with me for the last 50 minutes. I appreciate you guys coming in late on a Wednesday. There will be no class next week for admissions, but the week after we will do an essay reading class. So if you feel like you want your essay read, feel free to drop it in the link in the Kajabi site, and hopefully we'll get to your essay then.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them, and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.